Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrea Webster, and I'm very pleased to introduce today's webinar. We are the Prepared for Environmental Change webinar series, and we're hosted by the Indiana University Environmental Resilience Institute. We would like to acknowledge and honor the Miamake, the Lenape, the Bodewamik, and the Sawanwa people as past, present, and future caretakers of the lands on which Indiana University Bloomington is located. These ancestral indigenous homelands and resources are the current home of the Environmental Resilience Institute. I learned today that the state of Indiana used to have a license plate that said the land of Indians, and yet we have no indigenous lands that are still owned and operated by our indigenous communities today. So we certainly encourage everyone to engage with contemporary communities and to learn the histories of this land, to look at who has and does not have access to its resources, and to examine your own place, your own abilities, and your own obligations with the process of reparative work. Our webinar today will focus on building up local food systems through the lens of equity. All webinar attendees are muted, and we'll ask that you enter your questions into the chat function, which you can access by hovering your mouse over the screen, and you should see a chat icon as one of the icons at the bottom of the Zoom window. In the last few minutes of the webinar, we're going to share a feedback survey through a Zoom poll, and we hope you'll provide some feedback on the webinar today. We are recording the webinar, and I hope that you'll share a link to the recording with your colleagues. I will be sending that out along with some follow-up resources probably early next week, so look in your inbox for that. Now I'm going to pass it over to Janet McCabe, who is the director of IU's Environmental Resilience Institute, to moderate our webinar.
Right. Thanks so much, Andrea. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Welcome. As a result of climate change and changing weather patterns, our food systems are being impacted. And one thing we know is that everybody eats. These changes can disproportionately impact communities with lower incomes, communities of color, and adults with disabilities. The purpose of this webinar is for us to learn from two experts about how climate change impacts our food system and how local solutions can be built while protecting the most vulnerable populations. We're so excited to have Malala Kennedy, who is the director of the Division of Community Nutrition and Food Policy of Indianapolis, and Virginia Pleasant, who is the Value Chain Coordinator and Vice President of Northwest Indiana Food Alliance. And those are two of some of the best job titles that I've come across in recent times here. Both Malala and Virginia have vast experience in dealing with food systems that not only incorporate local solutions, but integrate considerations of equity as well. This webinar series is coordinated by IU's Environmental Resilience Institute. In addition to this webinar series, we have a number of other tools and resources available to local governments and the general public, and I really would encourage you to look into them if you're not familiar with them. One resource I want to make sure all of you know about is the Environmental Resilience Institute Toolkit, otherwise known as ERIT. This is an interactive resource that helps local governments prepare for climate change by providing information tailored specifically to their communities, and with a real emphasis on the Midwest. A lot of climate and resilience related resources out there are targeted towards coastal areas or very, very large cities. And that's not what characterizes the Midwest mostly. So we've made it a point to focus on those resources. We've just recently launched a user feedback survey about ERIT to provide us with feedback. And thank you, Joe, for putting the link in the chat. If you haven't already, please complete the survey by May 7th to help inform us on how to update and improve ERIT and keep it going. And Joe, you read my mind. I was going to ask you to put in the chat how people could get access to the survey. We really, really want your feedback. So we did this a year ago, right at the beginning of COVID, and we hardly got any replies. Big surprise, because everybody was totally distracted with COVID. So we're hoping to really get some good feedback this time. We hope you will join us for next month's webinar, what a great topic this is. How do you communicate with and constructively engage people that aren't that interested in what you're talking to them about? This is actually a topic that goes way beyond the climate change set of issues, but it's certainly something that we deal with when we're talking about environmental issues or climate change. So please sign up and encourage your friends and colleagues and neighbors and family members all to join. There's a link at the bottom of the page that the right side of the screen will allow you to register. Another resource I want to make sure you know about is the Sustainable Development Code website. This is not something that ERI has put together, but it is an incredible resource targeted towards local governments working on environmental issues. It's organized by category. You can see here there's a whole chapter on healthy neighborhoods and food security. And what the developers of this website have done is that they've compiled code and local government programs, especially code provisions, in a sort of good, better, and best hierarchy, so that you can see what other communities have done in these areas and not reinvent the wheel, or you'd have a place to start from. And it's a really comprehensive website. It just includes so many issues that would be of interest. I'm really thrilled that such a thing exists. So we want to make sure that you know about it. I want to thank our co-hosts for this webinar: Accelerate Indiana Municipalities, the Association of Indiana Counties, Health by Design, and the Indiana Public Health Association. They've been longtime supporters and promoters of our webinar series and our other programs as well. So thanks to them. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. We always have tons and tons of people who come to these things. It's always great to see new listeners or watchers or whatever you call yourselves, audience members, and as well as longtime steady viewers. So I am now going to have the pleasure of introducing our two speakers, and then I'm going to turn it over to them, and you won't hear from me again until the very end. Please do, if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat box. We will keep track of them so that the speakers don't need to try to pay attention to the chat box and their talk. And we will have time at the end for questions from you and anyone else. So let me start with Dr. Virginia Pleasant. As I said, she's the Value Chain Coordinator and Vice President of the Northwest Indiana Food Council. She has been completely immersed in local food and agriculture systems research and advocacy throughout Indiana for nearly 10 years. She's an active member of the Indiana Grown for Schools Network, the Indiana Farm Connect, the Midwest Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, the Indiana Food Council Network, the Ignite the Region Working Group, and the newly formed Lake County Resilience Coalition. So that tells you right there how much interest there is in this important issue. And we're just thrilled to have her with us today. Malayla Kennedy is the city's new director of the new division of Community Nutrition and Food Policy, which I think is also a reflection of how important Mayor Hogsett of Indianapolis feels that food security is for the city of Indianapolis. She serves as a principal advisor to the mayor's office on matters related to food access and insecurity in Indianapolis. She has over 15 years working for the city of Indianapolis in several roles, including as the Food Policy and Program Coordinator for the Office of Public Health and Safety, and as the Food Programs Manager for Indy Parks. She is a food policy advisor for the U.S. Conference of Mayors and serves on the board of both the Indy Hunger Network and Purdue Extension Marion County. So hard to find two more qualified people to talk about this issue with an Indiana background and specific experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Virginia to start sharing your slides. And thanks again for joining us, everyone.
Thank you for having me this morning or this afternoon for those of you on Eastern time. I'm really excited to share a little bit about the work that we do. I'm going to jump right in with a Wendell Berry quote. He once said that sustainable agriculture is one which depletes neither the people or the land. I'm going to introduce you to a bit of the work that the Northwest Indiana Food Council does and our work to cultivate food justice in the Northwest Indiana region. The woman that you see pictured here is Frida Graves, who manages Faith Farms and Orchards in Gary. Faith Farms has a mission of turning blight into light through urban farming. They address food insecurity where it lives deepest while empowering community members to grow food, cook, and work towards a collective vision for Gary's future. Food systems change is about being able to end food insecurity while also ensuring farm viability. Contrary to popular belief, they are not at odds with one another. We must address them simultaneously to create a new system of shared risk, reward, and power. In our short time together today, I want to shed some light on issues in the food system and the role of the Northwest Indiana Food Council in addressing them. Much of our work is framed around two ends of the food value chain, farmers and eaters. That is, we work towards improved food security and farm viability. You'll hear me say that a few times today. And finally, a bit on food systems change and collaboration. How can we co-create an alternative where everyone is fed and farmers make a living wage? To begin, I want to provide some context about Northwest Indiana here before going into further detail. The 7 counties in our service area range from urban to peri-urban to rural. Historically, the rural counties farmed and urban centers were home to industrial production of steel and other resources. Currently, 15% of Northwest Indiana residents are food insecure, or roughly 1 in 7 people. Increased food insecurity due to COVID-19 is expected to leave 1 in 6 residents food insecure and 1 in 4 children. We at the Food Council we believe that's not acceptable and we have to do something to change it. Reducing poverty is a key element in any policy for food security. We have very high rates of poverty in our urban centers like East Chicago and Gary, and some of the highest rates of the rural poor in the state of Indiana in Stark County. 50% of children in East Chicago live under the poverty line, which means under $26,000 a year for a family of 4. And even with such high poverty rates, warranting millions in SNAP dollars and even more assistance through WIC checks, only 27% of WIC checks distributed to families in Gary and East Chicago were redeemed in 2019. The compound effect of poor health indicators, lack of education, and poverty while living in a food desert shows that a systems approach is necessary for improving the lives of our most vulnerable. On this map, you will see a distribution of the USDA defined food deserts in our northernmost 3 counties. 22 food deserts are in Northwest Indiana in total. There are approximately 6,500 food deserts nationwide, with about 4,000 of them located in urban communities. Food activists are changing the way we speak about food deserts and using terms like food apartheid to better recognize the social inequalities that exist for food access. Food deserts are not a natural phenomenon. They are social constructions of inequity. They are largely concentrated in our urban centers, with the exception of Knox, which isn't visible on this map. It's located in Stark County, just a little bit below LaPorte County, off to the right there. Meanwhile, Indiana ranks in the top 10 for agriculture and imports 90% of its food and 98% of its fruits and vegetables. This indicates great potential for improving food access and farm viability by shifting purchasing habits. To sum that up, shifting 10% of purchasing habits to local foods would equal $1 billion in Indiana. If we shifted current purchasing for at-home household food budgets to locally grown and produced food, that $1 billion, it works out to $458 a year per household. We think that that's achievable. So how does the Northwest Indiana Food Council address these massive problems like food insecurity and food apartheid and not put the burden on farmers who already struggle to make a living? Food policy councils began to form in response to these big systemic issues, and their growth across the country is just one more example of the awakening that's taking place to our broken systems. The Northwest Indiana Food Council formed in late 2015 after a local food summit hosted at Valpo University. Attendees said Northwest Indiana needed someone to champion local food systems in a coordinated way. Our mission is to cultivate a just, thriving, and regenerative food system for all in Northwest Indiana. We envision a local food system where everyone has affordable access to nutritious food that is grown by regional producers using regenerative practices. We work towards collaboration, healthy ecosystems, equity, and resiliency for all in Northwest Indiana. As I've mentioned, our current work does this by focusing on support for farmers and independent farm viability and working towards food justice. Right now, the most critical need for cultivating food justice is improving food security in our urban and rural communities. Taking a systems approach to food and agriculture means that our work is often unable to be neatly categorized. As we work to co-create a system rooted in values of equity and resiliency, we typically find ourselves focusing on 5 key areas. These overlap and intertwine. We are rarely able to focus on one at a time, which is why we emphasize a wraparound systems approach that is collaborative. So I've mentioned regenerative agriculture a few times, but what is it? Most are aware, at least anecdotally, of the impacts of the climate crisis on our food and agricultural systems. From mild winters that increase pest and weed pressure to changing growing seasons and increasing rain in the spring that makes it difficult to plant. Project Drawdown, which is an international nonprofit, notes that agriculture and forestry also generate 24% of greenhouse gases globally. By shifting agricultural production practices and protecting ecosystems, we can not only reduce that number, but produce more table food for our vulnerable populations. Regenerative agriculture describes farming and grazing practices that, among other benefits, reverse climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity, resulting in both carbon drawdown and improving the water cycle. Some of the methods that our regenerative farmers use include no or low till, efforts to build soil and soil fertility, the encouragement of biodiversity, and well-managed grazing practices that keep animals on the soil and under the sun. Though organic gets much of the attention, many of the farmers we work with use growing methods that go beyond organic and utilize systems approaches. These approaches improve the land they work on with no chemical inputs. As an example, a couple of years ago, when the spring rains had flooded corn and soy fields, preventing planting, many of the farmers we work with were still able to get plants in the ground. They experienced less flooding because of the biodiversity and soil health on their farms, and they were better equipped to shift their planting to crops that grow quickly or to change their crop planning and location. The weather did have an impact. We didn't have tomatoes in July that year, but there was still food coming off the land. We promote regenerative growing practices to protect our natural resources and fight for food sovereignty so that our community members have the option of buying locally produced food and home gardeners can choose to grow food instead of lawns without pushback from zoning officials. The Food Council is entirely volunteer run and very much a grassroots group. With every project we embark on, we do all we can to simultaneously address food insecurity while supporting local farms. And we always engage with partners. Cultivating good partners and sharing leadership is critical to food systems change. Some of our partners include IU Sustainable Food Systems Science, Purdue Extension and Community Wellness Coordinators, the Legacy Foundation, the Northwest Indiana Forum, the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission, Faith Farms and Orchard, the PAC Center, Society of St. Andrews, and many, many others. But what is systems change? Systems change is about addressing the root causes of social problems, which are often intractable and embedded in networks of cause and effect. It's an intentional process designed to fundamentally alter the components and structures that cause the systems to behave in a certain way. Some of the food justice work we do is taking food insecurity head on in our urban communities. We've received grant funding to help launch farmers markets in Gary and East Chicago and expand redemption of SNAP and WIC. Before our program, only one market in all of Lake County would accept SNAP or WIC. We're working to have all markets accept them by the end of this year. We also started Double Up Bucks in East Chicago and Gary markets, where SNAP and WIC shoppers get double the value and buying power, which helps encourage farmers to sell into these communities more securely. Lake County Eats Local is entering its third year. This year, we will be expanding our programming with the support of a recently awarded No Kid Hungry grant. This will enable us to take a closer look at why SNAP and WIC redemption rates are so low in Lake County, as well as provide education for families with children under 5. Our program coordinator will also be starting to work with individual farms on SNAP certification. We hope to expand the program within the next 3 years throughout our 7 counties with an emphasis on communities that experience high rates of food insecurity. We also partner with groups that glean fields. In other words, they pick produce that would otherwise be left behind. And this is just one way that we're trying to close the loop on the cycle of food and reduce food waste. Promoting farm viability is another major effort of ours. Farm viability is ensuring that farmers can make a living off of farming as a sole occupation. We partnered on a USDA grant with IU, Purdue, and 3 other organizations to hire value chain coordinators around the state. As the Northwest Indiana Food Council's value chain coordinator, I support farmers in finding new direct bulk and wholesale markets like restaurants, independent retailers, and schools. I also connect farmers with resources to add infrastructure to their farms and improve their food safety plans. I've also been involved in advocacy efforts to bring awareness to the needs of our farmers and our food system. We are in the process of launching Region Roots, which is a virtual food hub that is targeted to bulk and wholesale sales. The hub will remove some of the burden of logistics and delivery and also assist with marketing so that farmers can focus on the important work of growing the food. We're also facilitating farmer cooperatives and mentorship in both urban and rural communities, and we have a small farm tool library to help farmers have easier access to scale appropriate tools and equipment. Access to scale appropriate infrastructure and resources is critical to ensuring the success of small scale independent farms now and into the future. So how do we tackle this big, messy, and often overwhelming task of systems change? I've distilled it down to 3 steps that we've taken here. We started with listening. We spent the first 2 years as a council listening to the community, identifying who the stakeholders were and where the gaps were at. Next, we engaged and collaborated. Collaborating with others doing the work allows us to admit what we don't know and also elevate the sentiment that a rising tide lifts all ships. We work together. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just support others that are doing the work so that we can focus on the gaps that are currently in the system. Next, we have worked to shift the focus from reacting to creating. Yes, emergency hunger relief is critical, but hunger is a symptom of a larger problem and relief is a Band-Aid. We work to empower communities and solve the root causes of these issues in partnership with organizations that are making sure people are fed in the meantime. But perhaps most importantly, be flexible. When we started, we recognized that consumer education was needed in our region. We hosted annual flagship events that were designed to educate and connect community members with their local food system and engage stakeholders. Since COVID, like everyone else, we've pivoted a bit and we've shifted our focus of our limited capacity on programs with more direct impact. And we still support community-based organizations that are doing the on-the-ground work of education. I would just like to conclude here with a quote that resonates with me. Food can and does change the world, and that's what gives it such unbelievable power. And now, more than ever, it's critical to recognize that food, how we grow it, sell it, cook it, and eat it, is as important as any other issue we are facing, one that is vitally connected to our lives, from culture and energy to art, science, the economy, national security, the environment, and health. Everything is connected through food, and we need to start giving it the attention it deserves. And with that, I will turn it over to Malele.
Thank you, Virginia. As I listened to you, I realized just how many commonalities there are between what's happening in the state and what's happening in Indianapolis. As I get ready to share my screen, it's great to know that what I'll be presenting is very much kind of like a honed in more like urban aspect of what we see happening within the state. Can you see my screen? Is it looking right like it should? Okay, awesome.
Okay, looks great.
It's great to be here to talk about the policies and programs that we've implemented here in Indianapolis and in Marion County to implement more equitable access to food for our Marion County residents. I am the director of the new division of community nutrition and food policy within the city of Indianapolis. This was a ordinance passed in January that establishes both the division and this more robust framework to support our food system. Make sure I'm moving forward. So on my next slide, the one thing, hopefully you're seeing it change. Did you see my slides change?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So there is, if there's one thing that I've learned in my time, both as food policy and program coordinator, and now as the director of the division, it is that here, there is no one size fits all approach to defining and addressing equitable food access in what that looks like. Every community is very different. What food access means is a very personal thing. It's a very integral thing within communities, and it looks even within Indianapolis. We have different townships, different city, county, council districts, and what that means looks really differently across the city. One of the pictures you're seeing here is a headline from the news that says food insecurity proposal causes frustration on Indy's northeast side. And this is actually what I walked into when I started this position, was this disconnect between the city wanting to do things to address food access and insecurity and not being able to get the voice of the community involved. At this point, we had picketers and protests and all kinds of things happening in front of the city county building, specifically because we, as the city of Indianapolis, were trying to define for the community what robust food access looked like. And we were very wrong with that. So what does that look like? And what do we mean by food equity in Indianapolis? First, it started off with recognizing that there are some very specific and very long-standing disparities within our community. That was recognized by our city county council in January of 2020, when the city county council declared racism as a public health crisis here in Indianapolis. And that really allowed us to take a deep dive into what equity looks like and determine that we needed some really specific goals. Those three goals around food were to address racial inequities within the food system, create this inclusive, sustainable, and effective way of coordinating efforts within the food system in Indianapolis. And then ensuring that we're improving equitable access to healthy food within the city. So our infrastructure changed. We created 2 parts, including the Division of Community Nutrition and Food Policy. And this division is within the city. And we are dedicated to promoting food in all policies across our city departments and our city funding streams. We're considering and advancing citywide food policy initiatives, and then really assessing our city goals and metrics related to our food landscape, and not just once every few years or when it's an election year, but on a regular basis, tracking our progress, communicating our findings directly to the community members and our policymakers. And then on the other side, creating this way for the city, this kind of conduit of information between the city and the community and our community organizations. And so we can try to have that relationship building that empowers the community to be able to talk with city, county officials related to food issues and feel like the community has a specific shared goal around solutions that specifically impact them. We want to elevate those community needs and goals quickly, so the communication between our city county government and the community is efficient. And then we want to make sure that we continue to be that conduit back and forth between community organizations, community members, residents, and the city county council. So here's where we are right now in Marion County. And these are our pre-COVID numbers. And I stick to these numbers because with COVID, there's so much change and fluctuation. And so we don't have consistent data on how COVID has impacted our food system in the long term. But we do know that these numbers have all increased due to COVID over the past year. But, 22% of Marion County residents are food insecure. That's over 300,000 residents that have an issue with access to healthy and affordable food in our county. Our meal gap continues to increase regularly. Virginia talked about our food deserts. We in Indianapolis have what's considered one of the largest food deserts by capita in the country. And that's something that is determined for us by our walkability score, which is only 4%. So 4% of the population have access to a grocery store within a 5-minute walk within Indianapolis. And how does that look on a map? I love showing maps because it really gives the idea of how widespread this is within our city. So you're looking at 3 maps. The map on the left is food access by census block groups, and that really shows those food desert areas within the city. And you can see like it's very spread out. This is not just in one targeted area. These areas in purple are all around Marion County. And if you look at the map in the center, this then shows the percentage of people of color in Indianapolis and where they live. So you can tell there's specific designated or really strong areas of population for people of color. And then the third map in that purple color shows it's kind of the overlap. And so this is the racial equity map. So this is where the food deserts meet the populations of the underserved populations of color in Indianapolis. And this has really determined our target areas within the city and where we knew that we needed to not just infuse programs, but specifically have outreach to the community to be able to work with them on these programs. what does that map mean? It means, like you saw, that statistics are dispersed. So it's all over. So our entire city has a huge issue with access to food. But it also shows, if you look at that, our final map, that African Americans are 50% more likely to be food insecure than the average population. And we'll talk a little bit about data and how we gather our data a little later on. But these are the numbers that we are dealing with. And so we have a robust group of partners within the city. These are just a few of them. The Indie Hunger Network, our Purdue Extension Marion County, our LISC agency, LISC Indy, are also very heavily involved. And we all talk together to be able to understand what the problem is. So what is the problem, and how do we understand the problem of accessibility to healthy food in Indianapolis? How do we involve as many community stakeholders as possible to create a plan that reflects the needs of the Marion County residents? And then how do we build on that to have a sustainable, a 5-year strategic plan and a long-term plan for food access and insecurity in the city? So these are just a couple of programs that we developed pre-COVID, specifically related to food access and insecurity. We knew that we needed a multi-level approach to that. And so we were given a funding stream, which is called the Indie Food Fund, to provide different levels of support that emphasize equitable and sustainable solutions. So the Community Compass platform was developed in partnership with the Indie Hunger Network to provide an app to be able to direct residents to food near them. Unlike Google, where you have to know what you're looking for, the Community Compass platform provides residents with access to hot meals, food pantries, farmers markets and farm stands, other food related events happening within the county. And it's meant to be able to be accessed either by app or by texting. So for those that don't have consistent access to Wi-Fi or internet, it's available. The other is the Lyft Grocery Access Program. And this actually was designed to get people within those zones that we mentioned to grocery stores. So it provided $1 rides initially just in those food desert areas to grocery stores. In 2020, that was expanded to all Marion County residents. So now with a simple code, any Marion County resident can use the Lyft app to get a $1 ride to or from their nearest SNAP and WIC certified grocery store. Speaking of grocery stores, one of the things that we wanted to do is to increase the level of accessibility to healthy and nutritious items within these communities. Knowing that some may need food pantries or other supports or just need transportation, there's others that want that. We want to make sure that we have those options directly in the community. So as part of our Indie Food Council, we established the Indie Local Grocers Coalition that provides assistance to small local grocers to become SNAP and WIC certified. The technical assistance is meant to reflect the needs of the specific store and that community, and then implement specific interventions for that community to build on those healthy food access needs. And so you're seeing 2 grocery stores that have received assistance. There were a total of 7 in 2020 and an additional allotment scheduled to be able to receive that technical assistance in 2021. Another program that we have all around, like bringing the needs of the community into the work that we do is the Neighborhood Food Champions program. Participants are able to participate in weekly sessions, learning about our food system, learning about how to create sustainable programs directly for their community. So this is very community-based, grassroots in how we work with these individuals to develop a plan for a project within their neighborhood, within their specific area. These go through a weekly session for 12 weeks. And then after that, we provide them with additional resources. So they start off with a $2,000 stipend. And then at the end of that, they're able to apply for an additional $10,000 through the Indy Food Fund. Data, like how do we know that all of this is working? How do we know what we need to impact? So examples of our data collection involve working with the IU Sustainable Food System Science to determine our social science-based data collection needs and analysis. We are currently working on a specific program with them called Food Comito Rall 317. The first part of that is working with local stakeholders and organizations on focus groups to ensure that they have input into the food system and what the food system needs are. Then we also work with community organizations to reach out to community members themselves on a community food survey. And that's meant to really engage the community on what they feel that they need within the food system, what's working, what's not, and also glean from them, how do they use the food system? And that way we know if the interventions that we've put in place are working, whether or not we need to make additional changes. And then we have this continuing dialogue between the Indy Hunger Network and the Unmet Need Study that gauges the need in the community, and our community survey. So this is what Food Comito Rall 317 looks like. We actually tell the community, make your voice heard. We want to hear from you. And we want them to know that they're a part of shaping the future of Indianapolis. We do encourage every resident within Marion County to complete the survey, and we do offer incentives like gift cards and other prizes to ensure that we can continue to engage the community and to keep them involved. You can learn more on our website, foodcomitorall317.com, and I'll put a few of these in the chat as well when we're done, so you can take a look at a few of our websites. And then our Thrive Indianapolis plan is our plan through the Office of Sustainability to be able to bring together our city agencies, community partners, and residents to keep on track for an equitable and healthier plan for the city. And so our entire Thrive plan can be seen online as well. This is our initial data was in 2018. We have scheduled to have 2-year updates to our Thrive plan. We are a little behind with that due to COVID, but our next plan is scheduled to be launched with an update next week on Earth Day as our goal. And so that provides our ongoing data and metrics around just some of the programs and projects that we have going on. And that's throughout the city. So that includes not just our food policy and program initiatives, but other agriculture and other environmental goals for the city. And I think that's it. If anyone has any questions, or I know we'll turn that back over, and I'll put my information in as well into the chat so that you can see some of these websites.
All right, well, thank you so much, Malele and Virginia, for your presentations. I just loved hearing about everything that's going on in your communities and hearing that there's ways to track these efforts with metrics now. I know when I checked in with these efforts a few years ago, people were still really struggling with this. So I love that that's happening. Janet, did you want to add anything to that before we open it up for questions?
Just to thank these two for the work in their community. And I think a lot of these programs are ones that are replicable in other places. Oh, I also wanted to mention that I was, this morning I was reading some clips, and it looks like there's a bill going through the Indiana legislature this year that would allow cities to designate urban agricultural districts. And it appears that that's passed through the legislature and it's on its way to the governor's desk for signature. So looks like Virginia knows about that one, and Melilla was nodding too. So this seems like a very good policy step for Indiana to take. I don't know if either Virginia or Melilla wants to comment on how you think this new law is going to support urban agriculture and help address food insecurity in your communities.
We are extremely excited about HB 1283. That bill was sponsored by Representative Earl Harris, who works up here in Lake County. He represents part of Gary and then some northern parts of East Chicago as well. The main thing that bill will do is first of all, I mean, provide recognition to urban agriculture as a valuable and viable option for food production. We still in Indiana, often agriculture is conflated with row crops and like hundreds or thousands of acres, and a lot of food can be produced on a really small space. So that bill will enable farmers to, first of all, have access to reduced rates on utilities, including water. And it will also make it possible for them to rezone their property as agriculture, which will allow them to put structures up on their property to extend growing seasons and to treat their property more like a farm instead of being constantly beholden to residential zoning laws. I think it's going to be a really huge step. There are still, some hoops that farmers have to jump through in terms of public hearings, but it's one of the first broad scale sort of recognitions of urban agriculture at the legislative level that I've seen in Indiana.
Thanks, Virginia. So we had one question come into the chat. It says from Kate, and she asks, since we can identify that food insecurity stems from poverty, how can organizations and initiatives address some of the root causes of poverty? For instance, joining forces with Fight for 15 and living wage campaigns, affordable housing campaigns, etc., for some of the system changes that were mentioned.
That is something that we see here in Indianapolis. Everything is very intrinsically tied together. My position and our division is located within the Office of Public Health and Safety. This office was designed specifically for all of those factors that kind of feed into the resiliency of the city. So in the Office of Public Health and Safety, we also have housing and homeless initiatives. We have reentry programs. We have violence reduction. We have veterans assistance. So we try to all be together because we know that these all impact each other. The same families that are having issues with food security are also having issues with housing, issues with reentry, and other social services that are needed. And it's just one way that we work together in that capacity. We also have a very robust connection with the service organizations and the community organizations that tie directly into the community. And so we meet regularly with them. We have a lot of cross collaboration between them, because we know that while the city may have funding for these initiatives, these community service organizations have the greatest impact and the greatest connection to our residents. And so it's great to be able to have that collaboration ongoing.
Thanks, Melody. John asks, can you speak a bit on how local farms can better connect a food distribution network? Our local food pantry in Gary is connected to an urban farm, but has more produce than we can distribute in peak season.
That is a fantastic problem to have, I think. In my experience volunteering with food pantries, fresh food, fresh vegetables, it's often non-existent. So to have more than you know what to do with, I mean, it's a good thing, but a bad thing at the same time, right? I would love to connect with you offline, and I can maybe give you some more specific answers once I know a little bit more about it, since I am up in your area. But I think generally speaking, connecting with the food bank can be helpful, as they have lists and directories of all of the pantries in the area that they donate to, or with a local food council can also help. We're here to help connect people with resources and really foster those connections that help get food to where it needs to go. As far as something that you as an organization could do, or that the pantry could do, I know Faith Farms in Gary is doing their blessings fridge, where they're distributing meals each week. We're starting to see those pop up a bit more, where it's sort of like the little free libraries, but with food. Sometimes with refrigeration, sometimes it's just a box set out, take what you need, leave what you don't, sort of model, depending on the scale of what you have left that you're unable to distribute.
Laura asks, I was curious about the system-rooted values in that Dr. Pleasant posted, for example, food justice, farm viability, infrastructure and economic development, and conservation and regeneration. Can you share more about how you picked those aspects of the food system?
Well, so I came onto the Food Council in 2017. So some of these values were already emphasized in the work of the Food Council when I joined. But generally speaking, all of these are values that consistently value up as levers of change within the food system, and issues that are pervasive, not just in Indiana, but across the nation in the food system. So we see those different values as entry points into the food system that one of them will resonate with almost anybody, right? If economic development is not what resonates with the audience that you're speaking to, then maybe they're going to, food justice might resonate more with them. There's something there for everybody that provides an entry point into talking about some of the overlapping aspects of the food system.
Great, thanks, Virginia. Our next question is, how can schools become successful hubs of food system knowledge, practical growing skills, and tackling hunger?
Malele, do you want to jump in, or?
Here in Indianapolis, we have a multifaceted school system. So our system isn't tied to our city or county government. Through our public schools, we have many townships, as well as our center townships, so Indianapolis public schools, but within Indianapolis, we have 9 other separate school districts, 3 other towns within Marion County that have their own school systems, and then we have our charter schools. So one of the best ways that we try to connect with schools is through connecting them with community-based resources. So some of the work that happens through our parks, that happen through our Purdue Extension Marion County programs, and to be able to work at their level around the food system and agriculture and farm and urban farming. We have some really great programs, like I said, again, through Extension and through some of our other growers. So we have some really robust urban farming education programs that are offered through some of our urban farms. And so connecting them with schools has been very well received. And now we have some schools that have their own urban farms. We have very extensive farms through schools like our Paramount School of Excellence, and they have a whole farm. And they produce and sell product, including in cheese and eggs and all kinds of things. And then we have schools that are just starting that just want to learn how to, build a raised bed. So we have all different levels here. In really building that, being that bridge between community organizations and schools is vital. So just connecting, being that connector of information.
All right, so I had one question for you, Malele. So you mentioned the Lyft Indie Grocery Access Program, which I feel like is just a silver bullet for many problems. Could you talk a little bit about how you got that program started? Did you just call Lyft on the phone, and how did it work?
Well, Lyft is actually very involved in different community impact projects. And so the Grocery Access Program was designed by Lyft as a corporate initiative. So we were able to start it small. We started on the northeast side of Indianapolis. And we had a whole registration process involved, and we had only specific grocery stores that residents could go to. And then Lyft helped us to expand that and kind of kick that off on the west side of Indianapolis. And then they were able to kind of hand that over to us as to the city over time. And we were able to expand that. So for instance, with some of our CARES Act funding, we were able to expand that program to all Marion County residents to be able to use. And then we added an access code, which is just Feed Indy, which makes it really simple. So there's no registration. You just put in a code into the app. So it really did grow over time to be something that it's now in a place where we kind of know our numbers, like they've stabilized, they increased drastically, especially during the winter time when families need more transportation to grocery stores. And then again in the summertime is our second peak season, and that's when families are buying more groceries because children are out of school.
Well, I love that. And I love how, I mean, it's very clear from both of you guys that you're using metrics to really drive a lot of your work. So you're using the numbers that you're finding in your communities to really decide which programs you need and to track the success of them. So it sounds like we need a whole nother webinar on those topics. So maybe we'll invite you guys back to talk about that. So thank you both so much for sharing your expertise and experiences today. We learned so much. And thank you all to everyone who has completed our webinar poll. Please share this with your colleagues when we send out the link next week. And we will be in touch with more information soon. Hope you all enjoyed it and take care today.